fuertísimo aplauso a Emily Gregory, coautora de Crucial Conversations, Master Trainer en Estados Unidos y a great person.
Thank you so much. Gracias, gracias. Buenos días. Soy Emily. Soy encantada estoy aquí. Y eso es todo mi español. So sorry. That is
Bueno, lo
all
siento,
I
pero esto
pretty
es
much
todo lo que
have,
puedo
but
decir en
I'm
español.
so delighted, truly
Pero
delighted
estoy
to be
encantada
with
de estar
you
aquí
all
con
today, and so
vosotros
grateful for Ackermann
y
Labs
muy
for putting this
agradecida a
amazing
Ackermann
event
Labs
on
por
for
organizar
us.
este evento
As
para
we get
nosotros.
started, a couple
Ahora que
of things that
empezamos,
you will need
quiero
for our
deciros un
time
par de
together
cosas que
today,
vais a
for our session
necesitar
today.
para este tiempo,
First, I would
para esta
encourage you to have
sesión que
something to
vamos a
write
estar
on
juntos.
and write
Uno,
with. If it's your phone,
deberíais tener
taking
algo para
notes,
escribir, sea
hopefully
el
you're going to get a lot of
teléfono,
good ideas
un
that you're
trozo
going to
de
want to write
papel.
down. So make
Esperemos que
sure you're
podáis
ready
tener
to
buenas
take some
ideas
notes.
que anotar,
The
así que
second
tenéis que
thing
estar
that you'll need
preparados
for
para
our
ello.
session today is someone
Dos,
to
vais a
talk to.
necesitar a
We're going to have
alguien
a
con quien
learning
hablar,
partner, a learning
una
friend, if you
pareja de
will. There are
aprendizaje,
going to
un
be
amigo
some
de
points where I
aprendizaje,
actually want you to talk to
porque en
each
ciertos
other.
momentos
So
os voy a
here's
pedir
what
que
I want
habléis
you to
entre
do right now.
vosotros, así que
Turn
lo
to
que
your
quiero que
right,
hagáis
turn
ahora
to
es
your left,
giraos a la
decide
derecha,
who
a la
looks the
izquierda y
smartest,
decidid
and
quién
partner up
parece
with
el
them,
más listo
okay?
y
All
os
right, so
juntáis con esta
everyone
persona.
partner up, find a partner.
Venga, que todo el mundo encuentre una pareja.
All right. That can
Muy
be the
bien.
trickiest part,
Vale,
the
tal vez esta
hardest
sea la
part.
parte más
Yes,
complicada
wonderful.
de todas, pero bien, ya está
All
hecha.
right, now that you have your
Ahora
learning partner,
que ya tenéis
I
una
want
pareja de
to
aprendizaje,
start by
quiero
giving us a little
empezar
bit of a frame or
dándoos
a
un
foundation,
poco
a
un
way of
marco
thinking
o unos
about crucial
fundamentos, una forma de
conversations for
pensar
today.
sobre las
And
conversaciones
to do
cruciales
this,
de
I'm
hoy.
going to introduce
Y
you
para
to
ello
a man
os voy
here
a
on the screen,
presentar
Enrique
a
Conterno.
este hombre que veis
For
aquí,
many
Enrique
years,
Conterno.
Mr.
Durante muchos
Conterno
años,
was the
él ha
SVP, the Senior
sido
Vice
el
President at
SVP,
Eli
el
Lilly, a large
vicepresidente senior
pharmaceutical
de
company.
Lilly,
Perhaps
una
many of
empresa
you are
farmacéutica
familiar
muy
with it.
importante,
He
tal vez la
was over all of
conozcáis.
their diabetes
Y
medicines.
ha
He was over all of
trabajado
Lilly
sobre la
USA at
diabetes,
one point.
fármacos, ha estado por todos
So a
Estados
senior
Unidos
leader at Eli Lilly.
y ha sido un
And
líder
one of the
senior
things
en
about
esta empresa.
pharmaceutical
Y una
or
de las
drug
cosas
development
de,
is that it
que
is a
tenemos que saber
very
sobre el desarrollo de
complicated
fármacos es
process.
que
And
es un
so
proceso
Eli Lilly
complicado.
partners with lots
Así
of
que
different
Lilly
organizations
se ha
in order to
asociado
bring
con
a drug,
distintas
a
organizaciones
chemical
para
compound from sort of
pues,
the
llegar a
laboratory
formar un
into
compuesto
to our
químico
lives. And
y
they partner
pasarlo
with
desde el
the
laboratorio a
National
introducirlo en
Institutes of
nuestras
Health in the
vidas.
US, and they partner with
Y
universities,
se han
and they
asociado
partner
con el
with
Instituto Nacional de
biotech
la
firms,
Salud de
and they
Estados
just have a
Unidos, con
huge array of
universidades, con
partners.
centros
And
tecnológicos.
at
Tienen un
Lilly,
amplio
they
abanico
call
de
this the
socios
Lilly
y Lilly
Alliance, this
lo
group
llaman
of
a esto la
partners that they work
alianza de
together
Lilly.
with.
Es un grupo de
And every year
socios
they
con los que
survey the
trabajan y todos
partnership
los
about
años
how
hacen una
things are
encuesta
going.
sobre cómo
It's
están
sort of like an
funcionando las
employee
cosas con
engagement
los
survey
socios.
that you all might
Es una
do, right,
especie
to
de
figure out
encuesta
how
de
things are going
participación, una
within
forma
this
de
Lilly
pensar en cómo
Alliance or
está
this partnership.
funcionando todas estas
So
alianzas
many years
o
ago, Enrique
asociaciones de Lilly.
Conterno was
Hace unos
interested
años Enrique
in
Conterno estaba
figuring out
interesado
what
en
things were happening
descubrir
in the
qué
partnership
cosas estaban
and how
ocurriendo en
people were
estas
working together
asociaciones
that
y
might
cómo
predict
trabajaban
or
las personas
correlate
juntas
with
que
the ultimate
pudieran
success
predecir o
of
correlarse con el
pharmaceutical,
éxito
a
final
drug
de
that,
un
that
producto
actually got
farmacéutico.
into the market and helped people. And so he had all the data about which projects and which drugs had been successful. And then he looked into all the data of, well, what was going on in those teams that was different, right? What factors over here in the Lilly Alliance predicted success in the marketplace? And he found something really interesting. One of the things that they had surveyed about was irritation. How irritated are you with the people you work with? How frustrating is it sometimes to work with these other people? And what they found was that as the level of irritation on the teams increased, the level of success increased. And it's a little strange. You might think, no, as we are more irritated and frustrated with others, our work would go down and be less successful. But it was the opposite. And here's what Enrique Conterno said about this. And this is what I want us to use as a frame for our conversation today. He said, nothing great is achieved without some conflict. Conflict sharpens the senses. It invites full engagement in solving important problems. But then he said this, and this is what is really so important. He said,
however, you must create more light than heat when you engage in conflict. Heat degrades, right? It destroys the substrate, the conditions of innovation, whereas light catalyzes it. So as you think about this today, I want us to use this as a frame. How can we engage in conflict in a way that it creates light, not heat? And why this is so important is this relates directly to the work that my co-authors and I have done around crucial conversations for the last 30 years. So this is how we define a crucial conversation. A crucial conversation is any conversation that has these three elements. So first, high stakes. It's got to matter. These are important conversations that have lasting and deep impact on the things that we care about. So high stakes. Second, opposing opinions. This is where we say, actually, we need that difference. We need that difference of perspective. We need people to come with different ideas. And there is going to be some conflict in that because we have those opposing opinions. But that's what's going to allow us to create something great. So that's the second condition, opposing opinions or differing perspectives. And then the third is strong emotions. Almost inevitably, it seems, this comes into play when the stakes are really high, when I really care about it, when you really care about it, and we see it differently. Almost inevitably, that strong emotion is going to come into play. So those are the three elements of a crucial conversation. Now, as you think about common conversations that are tough and hard to have, I've listed some on the slide here today. I'm not going to read all of these for you, but you take a scan of these and think about which ones of these actually are relevant for you, right? So maybe it's that you feel like you're in an organization or on a team where people's best ideas aren't being heard. Or the third one down, you're not given the resources you need to accomplish your objectives. Maybe people are pushing back on policies or processes. And then there's a whole host of them on the personal side as well. Here's what I want you to do, because I want this session to be real and I want it to be about you and the problems that you're facing. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. And I want you to turn to the person, to your learning partner, that person you picked, the person sitting next to you. And I just want you to talk about what's a conversation that's hard for you? What's a crucial conversation that you're facing right now? It may be one of those that's up on the board. It may be something different, but I just want you to take 2 minutes to talk about what are some of the really hard, crucial conversations that you face. All right, so everybody hopefully has a learning partner. If not, jump in with a group nearby you. I'll give you 2 minutes and we'll come back together. Go. how we typically respond when a conversation turns crucial. So to get us thinking about this, I have a little science experiment here, if you will. So this is an experiment done by a young woman, a young girl named Kiara Hughes. And she was interested in this idea of what happens when you are confronted with something that you find distasteful or disagreeable, right? That you don't agree with. And what are you likely to do? So here's what I want you to watch for as you watch this experiment. First, what do the kids in the video do? And second, why do you think they do it? All right? So let's watch. Maybe. Yeah, okay.
We all know adults stink at talking about tough things, but how about little kids? Here's my experiment. Feed kids wretched brownies, then see if they'll tell you the truth, especially when they think it might hurt your feelings. First, I made the brownies. Lots of chocolate, eggs, flour, but instead of just sugar, I added in salt. Lots of salt.
There's no way they can like these better.
Then, I invited kids of various ages for a taste test. I told them I want to compare ordinary brownies to my special brownies. My dear grandmother's special recipe. My dear dead grandmother's special recipe. I gave them some cash for being such a big help. Okay, here it goes. First, they ate the yummy sugar brownies. Next, they ate the salt bricks. Watch this girl. She can barely choke it down. And how about this girl? Even this kid. Look at that face. And now for the crucial moment. Will they tell me the truth and possibly offend me? I asked them to point to the brownies they like best. No surprise that some try to spare my feelings. But watch, even the one who gagged. And how about really little kids? Yep. Wow. But do you want to know what they really thought? Here, guys, I have leftovers. Does anybody want seconds?
And we have one little extra clip here so you can see what they really think. He's gonna stamp that brownie out there. Okay. All right. So, what did the kids in the experiment do? What did they do? Just shout out your answer. What did they do? They lied, right? Yes, they're liars. Now, why? Why do you think they lied? And again, I'd love for a few of you to shout out some answers here. Why did they lie? They were trying to be kind. Yes, wonderful. Others? Avoid conflict, the money, right? I got that dollar. I don't want to have to give it back. We got a little contract. Yes, great. Okay, so kind, avoid conflict, money. Anything else that you think of? Empathy, right? Like I feel bad for her and her dear dead grandmother, you know? Yeah, absolutely. So this is what's so interesting because what we find here is that we tend to make this choice between I can be honest or I can be kind, right? I can be candid or I can be respectful. But somehow we don't think we can be both. And the challenge is that because we make that choice, we tend to avoid or go to silence in some of these conversations. Now, you may be sitting there thinking, oh, but I would never do that. I mean, sure, these kids did it, but I am a mature, professional adult, so I would never do that. Well, a few years ago, we did a survey of just over 1,100 people, and we asked them about these kinds of situations when they're faced with a really bad plate of brownies, right? When something happens at work and they think, that is not good, that is wrong. What do they do about it? And before the pandemic, when we ran our survey, this is what we found, that about 1 in 5 of us here in this room, right, if it's a representative sample, about 1 in 5 people said, yes, I have concerns about something and I have let them go unaddressed or unresolved for weeks or even months. And then we reran that survey a few years later, and this is what we found. It had gotten worse. 1 in 2, just over 50%, 1 in 2 of us in this room would probably raise our hands and say, yes, I have concerns about something and I haven't fully addressed them. And this has gone on for weeks or even months. Just like these kids, we are often silent about the things that we have concerns about, right? It looks like when your manager comes into a meeting and says, oh, I have the best idea ever. This is going to just revolutionize our business. This is such a great idea. And you're thinking, these are the worst brownies ever. This is terrible. And the question is, what do you do in that moment? Again, 1 in 2 of us tend to go to silence. And the problem with that is what we have found in our research over the last 30 years is that if you don't talk it out, if you don't have the conversation, you will act it out. You will act it out sometimes in very unhelpful ways. And to give you a fun example of what that might look like, years ago, I came across this comic strip in the newspaper. And I thought it was such a good example of this idea of how if we don't talk out these tough things, we will act them out. So here's the situation. We have a couple. We're going to presume that they're married, sort of an older married couple. And the husband says to his wife, whenever I get mad at you, you never seem to get upset. How do you control your temper? And she says, oh, I just go and clean the toilet. And he says, like, that's interesting. How does that help? And she says, I use your toothbrush. I felt so much better after that, right? If you don't talk these problems out, you will act them out, often in very passive-aggressive and unproductive and unhelpful sort of ways. And what we have found in our research at Crucial Learning is this, and this is sort of the central idea that I'd love to share with you today. The health of a relationship, a team, or an organization is a function of the average lag time between identifying and discussing problems. Right? Let me say that again. The health of a team, of a relationship, a team, or an organization is a function of the lag between how long does it take me from the time I have a concern to the time I talk about that concern. Now, note that that's not necessarily resolving the problem, solving the problem, but it's how long does it take me to be willing to talk about it. And so what we want to do in these crucial conversations is recognize that the longer it takes to have them, the harder and often the higher that conversation gets. The higher it has to rise in the organization, the bigger the problem. If we can start having these conversations earlier, they are easier to resolve. So with that, let's talk about your conversations, because I said I want to make this real. So here's what I'm going to do. We're actually going to use some of the skills that we talk about today. So what I want to do is, with your learning partner again, I want you to each pick one conversation for each of you that's tough and hard to have. What's that conversation? I'm going to give you about 4 minutes to talk about it, really get into sort of what the issue is, why it's hard to have, how you've tried to have it in the past. Then we'll come back together and I'm going to teach you a couple of skills and then give you a chance to apply it to that conversation. Okay? So in the next 4 minutes with your learning partner, sort of 2 minutes apiece, I'd like you to pick what's a tough conversation that you need to have and why is it so hard to hold. Okay? All right, 4 minutes, go.
for the Q&A.
Oh, okay.
The people will have courage enough to speak in English out loud. I don't know.
Okay.
It's already on.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Okay, and I have till 10:45. Yes?
45, 50?
It doesn't have the time on it.
No. 45, 50. Something like that. You're doing great, by the way. People are loving it.
Okay, ding ding, time is up. Time is up. Finish up your conversation and we'll come back together. Go ahead and finish up that conversation and we'll come back together. Very good, very good. Now, as I said, you'll still have another opportunity to talk, so don't worry. Okay, so it sounds like, just from watching and listening, that everyone was able to come up with a crucial conversation. Usually that's the case. I think in 25 years, I've had two people say, I have no crucial conversations to have, right? So normally we can all find one. Now I want to talk about, okay, you've got that conversation in your mind. How do you have this conversation? How do you start to hold this? This is the Crucial Conversations model. Some of you may be familiar with this model. For others, it may be new. This is the model that we go through in our training course that Ackermann Labs offers. We're not going to go through the whole thing in the next half an hour because it's actually a 2-day course. We'll talk about just a couple of highlights. But what I want you to see as you look at this model is really the central idea that in a crucial conversation, our goal is to fill what we call the pool of meaning. It's this idea that I'm going to be putting my meaning in, and I want you to put your meaning in, because the goal in a crucial conversation is to fill the pool, is to expand that pool, because we know that when you expand that pool, you will make better decisions and you'll take more committed actions, right? When people have been heard, they will be more committed to the path going forward. So that's our goal in a crucial conversation. And where we're going to focus first is on this ring that is around the pool, that you see the word safety there. We're going to talk a little bit about this. And to do this, let me share with you another, I think, fairly interesting study that was done about 15 or so years ago inside a very large organization that many of you are familiar with. And where's my friend Pablo? Actually, I found out used to work for Google. Some of others of you may have worked for Google as well. So about 15 years ago, a very small group of people in Google's people department, actually, in their HR people department, started a project they called Project Aristotle. And the question they asked themselves is, what makes the very best, most effective team? Google has tens of thousands of teams every year, teams that are reorganizing and shifting and working on different projects. And they really wanted to understand, how do we build the very best team? And as they thought about this, they started looking into what are the different factors that they thought might contribute to making the perfect, most effective team. And they thought about things like, is it hiring the best people, right? Is it recruiting and bringing the very best, highest, smartest people onto the team? Is it maybe something about personality styles and personality mix, right? Do you need more introverts or extroverts? Should the manager be an introvert or an extrovert, right? How does that impact the team? They also looked at things like the structure of the team. Do they meet weekly? Do they meet daily? Do they never meet at all? What kinds of tools do they use to interact? They even looked, and I have to say, I think this is a little scary and creepy. They looked at friendshipping and socializing outside of work, because they actually could track their people outside of work, and they knew who was hanging out as friends together. So they looked at all these factors, and what they found? None of them. None of these factors could consistently and reliably predict the effectiveness of the team. So this is really puzzling. And honestly, the team didn't know where to go next. Like, well, what else should we be thinking about here? So they took a dive into the social science research around teaming, around collective intelligence. And they came across a concept that they were able to later prove out with their data from Google was the factor that was the predominant and determining factor of what created success in the team. And it was something called psychological safety. This concept that social scientists had been researching for many, many years, but was at the time, again, about 15 years ago, new to the folks at Google, psychological safety. Now, as you think about psychological safety and what this is, and you think about what psychological safety is, let me just do a quick little tangent into the social science research about it, because I think this is really fascinating. When they do social science research, like at universities, around collective intelligence or what makes the smartest team, and they've identified, as I said, this factor they called psychological safety, they have to find a way to measure it, right? Like, you have to actually be able to quantify it and put a measure to it. And so they look at two different factors to determine psychological safety when they measure it. And the first one is what they call equality of distribution in conversational turn-taking. And even in English, that is a mouthful right there. It is such a PhD way of saying you have to take turns when you speak. Like, that's all it's saying. Equality of distribution in conversational turn-taking just says we take turns. I want to share and I want to hear from you. So that's the first thing they look at. The second thing they look at when they measure psychological safety is something called social sensitivity. How sensitive are you in a social situation to what's going on with the other person? And they had to figure out a way to measure and quantify social sensitivity. And so one of the predominant or the primary ways that they measure social sensitivity is what they call the reading the mind in the eyes test. Now, I'm not affiliated with this. It's a test, an instrument that you can use for free, actually. If you want to, later this evening, to test your own social sensitivity level and find out just from a percentage standpoint, how socially sensitive are you, you can just go to Google and type in reading the mind in the eyes, and it'll come up and you can take this test. But what they do is they give you this little piece of someone's face, just a little eye snippet, and then they give you 4 adjectives, and they ask you, what do you think this person is feeling right now? I think there's like 36 or 38 questions on this, and you have to say, like, I think this is what this person is feeling. I can intuit this because I am sensitive to it. So I've read just 2 of them for us to do today, just to see how socially sensitive we all are. So are you ready? Okay, this first one, this is going to be a shout out. This first one, do you think it's apologetic, friendly, uneasy, or dispirited? What would you say? Uneasy. I heard a couple of different ones. That's okay. This one's uneasy. This is impressive, by the way, when you can do the reading the mind and the eyes test in English, not Spanish. So I'm very impressed. So this one's uneasy. Here's this next one. Irritated, disappointed, depressed, or accusing. Accusing, yeah. Oh, you Spaniards, you know accusing. I love it. You are very fast on that. Excellent, excellent. Yes, so this one is accusing, right? Okay, so this is how they measure psychological safety and social sensitivity when they're doing research about it. But that's not very helpful to us because it's not like in our workplaces we're going to go around like this looking at people's eyes, right? Like that's not practical or even helpful. But I think what's important about this is that it gets to the heart of what underlies psychological safety. This idea that I'm paying attention to you and I care enough to try and think about how you might be feeling in that moment. Now, a more practical definition of psychological safety comes from the work of Amy Edmondson. So she is a professor of management and leadership at Harvard University and is probably, I would say, the foremost scholar over the last 20 years on psychological safety. And she defines it this way. Simply put, psychological safety makes it possible to give tough feedback and have difficult conversations without the need to tiptoe around the truth. Right? Without that false choice that we saw earlier of I can be honest or I can be kind. Psychological safety says I can be both. In psychologically safe environments, people believe that if they make a mistake, others will not penalize them or think less of them for it. All right, so here's what I want to do now as we think about this idea of psychological safety. I want to kind of draw actually on the wisdom of this room. We have a lot of smart, experienced people in this room, and I'd love to hear a little bit from you about what you do to create psychological safety, to make it safe in a relationship or a conversation to talk about these tough issues. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you just 2 minutes, again with your learning partner. It goes pretty fast. 2 minutes with your learning partner. What do you do when you have to have a tough conversation to try and create some safety around that? What are the practical, actionable things that you do? So I'll give you 2 minutes to discuss, and then I'm actually going to have some of you report out so that we can share these best practices as a group, okay? All right, 2 minutes, here you go. Oh. Oh. I know. It come back together here. All right. Very good, very good. Okay, so here's where I would love to just have a few of you share, right? Just raise your hand, I'll call on you. What is something that you have found is really helpful in creating psychological safety? How do you make it safe when you have to have a tough conversation? We're going to, as I said, draw on the wisdom of the room here to come up with some great things of how you can create psychological safety. So what do you do? What have you found is effective? Yes, right up here. Asking questions, right? I'm going to come, tell me your name. Antonio, I'm going to come back to that because that's a great one. I have a thought on that. Okay, so asking questions, great. Other things. Yes, right here. Oh, showing vulnerability. I love that one. And maybe let's just expand on that, either you or others. Like, how do you show vulnerability? Like, what does that mean to show vulnerability? Share things about yourself that are maybe a little uncomfortable, right? Maybe a time that you haven't done as well or you messed up or something like that. Okay, great. I love that. By the way, and I say this with a great love for engineers. We were talking about this with the group earlier. I train a lot of engineers, and I find that when you say to them, show vulnerability, they look at you like, what do you mean, right? So you have to sometimes be a little more explicit about what actually we're talking about. Okay, that's a great example. Other things that you've done to create psychological safety. Show empathy. I love that. And again, I'm just going to push just, and what would that sound or look like to show empathy? Yeah, put yourself in that other person's position. It sounds like saying things like, oh, I can see this is really hard. I understand how hard this must be right now, right? I'm showing that emotional connection or that empathy. I love it. Let's take maybe two more other things. Yes, right here. Just having a sense of humor sometimes helps. Absolutely, right? It breaks the tension just a little bit. I love that. I love that. One more, maybe? I'm looking. Oh, yeah, right over here. Ooh, I love that. Just listen, right? Without giving feedback and especially without giving judgment or commentary on what you're hearing, right? To just listen to it. Okay, I love this. I wanted to, so all of those were so great. I did want to come back to Antonio's for just a minute because it was so good, actually. Antonio's was asking questions. There's a great little study that was done a few years ago that shows that probably the most effective thing you can do to create psychological safety is not just to ask questions, but to ask for feedback, to ask that other person, can you give me some feedback on, right? That's one of the number one things you can do to create psychological safety in a relationship. And I think the reason why is, again, it says, hey, first of all, I'm going to be a little vulnerable. I'm going to be a little humble. I'm going to say, I'm not perfect. I'd like some feedback. But it also demonstrates intense respect for that other person. I want feedback from you. I care what you have to think about what I'm doing, right? So it's a really, one of the very best ways is to ask not just questions, but questions about me, feedback from me. So I loved that. Now, as you think about all those answers that you all just gave, I think, and I would like to suggest to you that there's a single through line that connects all of those answers, and it aligns perfectly with what our research over the last 30 years has shown about what it takes to create psychological safety. And it is this. When we look at psychological safety, we think about it this way. People never become defensive or feel unsafe because of what you're saying, the content of your message. People become defensive because of why they think you're saying it, the intent of your message. And as I think about those things that you just said, I think they're all examples of demonstrating a good intent, right? When I show empathy, my intent is that I care about you. When I show vulnerability, my intent is not to be better or superior to you. My intent is to be connected with you, right? When I ask you questions, my intent is to understand where you're coming from. All of those things that were just shared were about intent. And that's what we have really found. So said another way, safety is all about intent, not about the content or the topic of the conversation. None of what you just shared had anything to do with what you were talking about. It was all about how we were talking about it. So safety is all about intent, not content. Now, I want to do this just a slightly different way here. We're going to kind of turn this 180 degrees And I want you to think about a conversation failure, right? A conversation you had that went really, really badly. And maybe it was that you lost your temper, you shouted, you got really angry. Maybe it was you completely shut down, right? You were like, oh, you know what? That's fine. We'll just do exactly what you said. I have nothing to say here. I just want to get out of the conversation. And you shut down. Maybe it was a conversation, a digital conversation. You saw something online. It really triggered you. You posted out, post that message, right? You sent kind of a passive aggressive text, something like that. So I just want you to think about that conversation that didn't go very well. And now, and I'm just 10 seconds on this. This is really quick, okay? I want you to turn to your learning partner. I don't want you to share the conversation. I just want you to share in that moment when the conversation went bad, when you said something you later regretted, or you didn't speak up and say what you wish you had. In that moment, what was your intent? What was your goal? What was your motive? What were you trying to accomplish right then in that moment? Okay? So 10 seconds, turn to your partner. What was your goal in that conversation? Go. All right, ding ding, that was fast. I know. Let's come back together. All right, so this is where I want you to be really brave, and I promise no follow-up questions about this whatsoever. But I just would love you to shout out, a few of you shout out, in that moment when that conversation went bad. Again, we got all the safety in the room here. We love each other. In that moment when the conversation went bad, what was your motive? What was your intent? Just shout it out. Be brave. Punish. I love it. Oh, it's so good. Oh. Others. To be right. Sorry, I couldn't hear it. To end the conversation? Oh, to win. That's even better than ending, is winning. Ending by winning is what it is. Excellent. To win the conversation, to be right. Anyone else? Justice. Sorry, what's that? Ooh, was it to acknowledge your mistake or to make them acknowledge their mistake? Sometimes both. Yes. Okay. Very good. So good. Thank you for being honest. This is always a little unflattering sometimes. And again, I wasn't looking very hard, but I'm pretty sure it was maybe Alex that said punish. Yeah, that was bold, Alex, right there. I love it, right? Okay. I'm so there with you, right? As are, by the way, all of human beings, we're all like this. When we think about intent in conversation, we find that there's kind of two big buckets or two big categories of the intents that we bring to a conversation. So over here, starting on the right-hand side, we have the intents of dialogue. When we're at our very best, when the conversation's going so well, we've come because we want to learn and understand and strengthen relationships and produce results and all the good things. But sometimes, mostly when the stakes are high, when we have opposing opinions and my emotions start coming into play, right? When that conversation turns crucial, our intents, they shift. They shift from that right side over to this left side. And we have unhelpful intents, right? Things like punishing, winning, being right. Sometimes it's not that, it's I want to be in control. Or I just want to feel comfortable, and I don't feel comfortable here, so I'm going to end the conversation, right? There's a lot of those differences. Now, I will tell you, I think I'm exceptionally good at unhelpful intents because mostly, like when I'm in a conversation that goes bad with my husband, my intent is not just to be right, which I am, but for him to be wrong, acknowledge that I'm right, and then apologize to me for being wrong when I was right? Whoa, there's a lot going on there, you know? So these are our unhelpful intents, and they're very human, they're very understandable, they're very normal, but they also tend to shut down conversation. These are the kinds of intent that take us out of dialogue by destroying psychological safety. And so what we need to do when we find ourselves over here on the left-hand side is we need to get ourselves back to the right-hand side. And what we teach in Crucial Conversation is a skill called focus on what you really want. It's that when you realize, oh, this is going badly, and you take that pause, what do you do inside that pause? Well, you ask yourselves, and we train people to ask themselves, what is it I really want here? What do I want for me? And what do I want for the other person? What do I want for our relationship and our organization? Now, this can be a tough question to ask sometimes. And as I've worked with people over the last 20 years with this, I have come to believe that the most important word on this slide is the word for, which is why I underlined it here. Because we often mistake it and we think the word is from, but it's not. So I want you to remember for, not from. And let me explain what I mean by that. When I'm coaching people for a crucial conversation, someone will come and say, Emily, I need some help having this conversation. And I say, great, let's talk about it. And we start pretty much right here. What is it that you really want? What do you want for yourself? They have no problem answering that. And then I say, and what do you want for that other person? And they often say, I want them to change. I want them to do it better. I want their performance to improve. I want them to show up on time, whatever it is. But they're answering what they want from that other person, not what do they want for that other person. And that's why it's so important to realize this question is not what do I want from them? I want them to change. I want them to improve. I want them to be better. It's what do I want for that other person? And when you get to that point where you really have that good intent of what you want for that other person, that's when you can truly create the safety that's needed in a conversation. Now, once you have that good intent, what do I want for me, for them, and for our relationship, then it's time to share your good intent. We say knowing your good intent is only the first step. Once you have it, you need to share it out loud. And here's why. This is so important. People are hardwired to detect and defend against threat, right? If you think about it sort of evolutionarily, right? Early man out on the savannah, right? You see something in the distance, not really sure what it is. If you assume the worst, if you assume it's a threat and prepare for that threat, you're going to be more likely to live to see tomorrow and pass on your genes to the rest of us, right? People are literally hardwired to assume the worst, to have that negativity bias, to detect and defend against anything that's coming at me that could be a threat. So here's what that means for crucial conversations. If you're coming to have a conversation with me and I don't know why, I don't know what your intent is, I'm going to assume it's bad. And I'm going to prepare to defend myself against this. So I often tell people when they're starting to have crucial conversations that your rule should be you start every conversation with a statement of good intent. It can be long, it can be short, it can be, right? But you start with a statement of, here's why I want to have this conversation before you jump into the conversation. Now, I've put a few examples up on the board here, on the slide. Not because you're meant to memorize them or these are scripts, but because the most important thing is that you're authentically sharing what your own intent is, but just so you can kind of get a sense of how this could sound, right? I really want to support you in your career, and I have some feedback that might help you get better. I'd like to figure out a way where we can both achieve our goals, given the limited time frame and resources. I want you to know that I support your position and the final decision we make. I also have some information that could impact future decisions. Are you open to hearing it, right? These are statements that say, here is why I'm coming to have this conversation with you. So you start with that statement of good intent. Now, here's what I want you to do. As you think about your own good intent, what you, in that conversation that you've picked with your learning partner, what you want for that other person and how you will share it, I'm going to give you 4 minutes again to get back with your learning partner. And what I really want you to do is I want you to come up with and get their coaching on a script. What is the first sentence you will say to start your conversation that shares your good intent for that other person? All right, so you'll be ready with that first sentence. I'll give you 4 minutes and then we'll come back together. Go. actually share your statement of good intent, but I'm just curious. Was that easy? Was it hard? What was that experience just like of trying to think about what your good intent was and how you'd share it out loud? Easy, hard, where did it fall kind of in that spectrum? Would love to have a couple of you share. Yes, so Antonio says it depends how easy it is, depends on whether it's clear in your mind what you want to say. And that's what we often find, that the reason people haven't shared their good intent is honestly, they haven't stepped back and thought about it. And the place where they really haven't thought about it is what's their good intent, again, for that other person. Often when we go to have a crucial conversation, we're very aware of how that situation is impacting us. And how it's, why it's important to us. That's why we're having the conversation. But we haven't always thought about how it might be impacting them and what our good intent towards them is. So yes, getting clear on that. Excellent. Others, easy, hard? Some are saying hard. Okay, that's okay. Some might be saying, "Oh, it's pretty easy too," right? There's no right answer here. We often do find it's a little bit of a muscle that people haven't used before to really stop and think, what is my intent here? We spend so much time when we're preparing for crucial conversations thinking about the content of our message, right? What's the problem? What's the data? What's the specific behaviors? What's my supporting case that I have that I'm bringing? And we very rarely think about the why we are bringing it, right? That intent behind it. Okay. With that, here's what I'd like to just we'll wrap this up, and I think we'll have a little time for questions here. But as you think about crucial conversations, I want to go back to this idea that I shared at the beginning, because this is what it's really about. That as we think about how to step up and have these conversations, it's about the health of our relationships. How vibrant and healthy and solid and effective are our relationships, our teams, and our organizations? Our ability to step up quickly and have tough conversations is the determining factor. And as you think about this, one last thought I want to share is this idea that oftentimes we'll be asked, but what if I'm the only person trying to hold these crucial conversations or create psychological safety, or I'm the only person that's gone through the workshop and learned these skills? Can I really make a difference? Well, the answer is a resounding yes. We have a tremendous amount of research that shows the power that one person speaking up and speaking up effectively can have on a culture and on an organization. But I want to end with just another fun science project, a science experiment here about the power that just one person can have when they start to speak up around creating safety for everyone else around them. So this is the power of one.
Have you ever felt like one of these kids? Have you ever been paralyzed with fear because you disagree with what a group was saying, but didn't know how to say so? Have you ever wondered how you could disagree without becoming an outcast? Stay tuned. Here's our experiment. We asked a group of 9th graders to help us mess with innocent little 8th graders. They were all pretty willing. Basically, I wanted to see how the 8th graders would react when subjected to a ton of pressure to say something they knew was wrong. I invited a bunch of kids to be a part of an experiment. I told them it was a test of visual perception. My research colleague, Malachi, would show them 2 charts. One had 1 line on it. The other had 3. All they had to do was tell us which of the 3 lines, A, B, or C, was the same length as the one on the first chart. How hard could that be? Just in case you missed it, even an 8th grader could tell the answer is C. Now, here's where it got fun. The 9th graders agreed to give the wrong answer. They would pick A. After hearing my 9th grade accomplices give the wrong answer, I wanted to see what the subject would do.
A.
Here they go.
A.
But he wasn't the only one to roll over for the crowd.
A.
In fact, he had lots of company.
A.
Now, they didn't all follow the crowd. Every once in a while, one would speak their mind.
A. Or C.
But did you see how much he squirmed when giving the right answer? Peer pressure is a tough thing. All in all, 2 out of 3 went along with the wrong answer. And why?
I said A because everyone else said A.
Now, if you're sitting there smugly thinking adults like you are much better at speaking their mind, you should read the work of the famous social scientist Solomon Asch. He found that older folks like you conform exactly as often as these hormone-crazed teenagers. But here's where I wanted to add to Dr. Asch's original research. I wanted to find out whether one person could be as strong as a group. Is it possible that one person who knows how to skillfully and respectfully disagree could offset an entire group's peer pressure? In the next round, I had 7 people give the wrong answer, and then one person say,
I think I see it differently. I think C.
I'm seeing it differently, but I think it's C.
I think it's C.
And you know what happened? 95% of the subjects then gave their true opinion. 95!
I also think C. Can't.
C.
Can't. I'd say C. 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 C.
Can one person who disagrees in an effective way make it safe for others to do the same? According to my data, yes.
So often we think about crucial conversations and we think, oh, I need to have this conversation with this other person, and if I can do it well, that will be good for just me and them. But what we have found that is so true is that when you start speaking up, when you start having conversations, when you start creating that psychological safety, especially as a leader in your organization, the impact doesn't stop with you and the person you're having the conversation with. You start to make it safe for everyone else around you to speak up as well. And that is really the power of crucial conversations. With that, I will just say thank you so much. It has been delightful to be with you all. And now I have a yellow slide. I have no idea. It has been so wonderful to be with you. I'm looking forward to the rest of the day, and I thank you for your time and your participation. Thank you. Questions? Yeah, do we have, okay, like 5, they're saying, I was checking, they're saying we have about 5 minutes for a little Q&A. If anyone has a question that they'd like to ask, we only just covered the tip of the iceberg with crucial conversations, so happy to answer any questions. Yes, right here. And they have a translator for me if you'd prefer to ask your question. Okay. Yes.
German square mind, it's different. In Spanish, we try not to hurt people's feelings.
Yeah.
I don't think it makes sense. So if you haven't been within the same organization with that, I mean, the message is clear, but how do you, culture is heavy. It's very heavy in our minds and as psychologists. So how do you break that up? How do you...
Yeah. Yes, I think that is a great question. And actually, what I'd like to do is give you my thoughts, but then I know we have some culture experts in the room too, so if someone else wants to add into that. I think 2 things. First, we really encourage people to have what we call a process conversation. So if you have a conversation about the project or the deliverable or the deadline, that's a very different conversation than coming to someone, especially when you start working with them and saying, hi, I'm Emily. I'm an American. Tell me your name. Eduardo, you're Spaniard, right? I'd love to talk about what you need from me in order for us to work effectively together. How can I do that?
I live in America, so I travel back and forth.
Yeah.
And I see the difference. They're blunt. They want something, they just say it. They don't think, they just, boom.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so is your question really, how can I tell Americans to stop being so blunt? I mean, that's a good question. That's a good question. If that's your question, I can answer that one too.
It's within our culture.
Yeah.
Change. But if you have to make that person work with a Spaniard and with the German at the same time, the culture it creates conflict.
Yes, it does. And I would say that I do think that well, 2 things. I do think people can change, right? We've spent 30 years trying to get people to change their communications and found some really good results with that. And I do think there's a way that what we just talked about, intent, comes across here. So if I start the conversation and say, hey, I'm Emily, I'm an American. I realize that that means I come from a culture of being very direct. I hope that if I'm overly direct here, you will know that my intention is good and you will give me feedback about that, right? If you can train people to say that good intent of here, I care about that relationship, then what I found is even when I am sort of blunt, people are like, oh, but she's acknowledged it, she's trying, she's explaining, she recognizes and she's trying to change on that. Now, again, you have to get someone else to change. The flip side is, right, also, I think there's always both. There's who's giving the message, but there's also on the other side saying, hey, we have to understand that people come from different cultures and they're going to, so I'm not going to judge that. I'm not going to tell myself a story about Emily's behavior. The story I'm going to tell is not, she's terrible, it's she's American, which maybe feels the same for some of you sometimes, but right, it's what story am I telling about that other person, and how can I choose to tell a different story that allows for differences? Does anyone, Eduardo's question was a great question. I'm wondering if, so I would say, right, that you can have a process conversation about how we're talking. You can share your good intent and saying, hey, I know this is like my cultural baggage that I'm bringing. I'm trying to work better, but if I come across too blunt, please help me with that. And then you can be generous to the other person and be like, oh, they're not just, you know, a horrible person. This is their cultural norm, and I can be generous about that. Other thoughts that, yeah, right back here. Right.
So sometimes it's difficult because the other person is not even prepared to have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes when you have to say a direct message, you'd find the way, but culturally it's not understood. It's like the ahorita in Mexico, right? That you try to make it, you know, you have to do it now, and they tell you yes, ahorita, which means right now. But they say it twice, that's not working, right? So that it's, you know, sometimes difficult to apply all this that you're saying.
Yes. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Was there another hand? Oh, Antonio.
How we can manage this situation.
So the question was about how do you have a conversation across different levels of power hierarchy in an organization, right? When we're not just with peers. I think that often it does come back to psychological safety, right? And let me be transparent. I certainly power hierarchy impacts how safe I feel in a conversation, right? If I'm the boss and I'm speaking to my direct report, I probably have a greater degree of psychological safety because, right, I know that I have that power. But I still need to create safety for that other person. The place where we often do it is when we say, I'm speaking up in the organization. I need to go tell my leader, my manager, and I'm frightened about that, right? How do I do that? Is to remember that that person's a human being. What we see most often is that people don't create psychological safety going up. They don't go in and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about something, right? That you saw it on the slide. I know that you're the decision maker and I respect that. I also want to be able to share some concerns I have so that we can manage them if we go forward and that we'll be more likely to be more successful. Can we have this conversation? So I think that you have to remember, even going up in the organization, that you have to create that psychological safety. And asking for the conversation is one of the best ways to do that. With that, I think our time is at the end, although we're going to have coffee or something and be around. And I have no, we're not. We're 100% not. As it turns out, I am not in charge here at all of the schedule, and Carlos is in charge. So I will just once again say thank you. Looking forward to spending some more time with you today, and thank you so much for your engagement. Appreciate it.